Princess Ceres stood alone on the balcony of the royal palace, staring out into the endless void of space. The stars shone brightly against the blackness, a silent reminder of the vast empire she was meant to rule. The Xelar Empire, her family's legacy, was the most powerful in the galaxy, yet today it felt fragile in her hands. Her thoughts were clouded by the tensions within her kingdom. There were whispers of rebellion, enemies from within plotting her downfall. Ceres could feel the weight of the crown on her head, heavier than it had ever been. Despite her training, despite her many advisors, she could not shake the sense of dread that clung to her like a shadow. But there was something else on her mind, something that had haunted her for years, an event from her childhood that she could never forget. When Ceres was a young girl, she had been the target of an assassination attempt. The day had begun like any other, with the sun rising over the palace and servants rushing to prepare the royal breakfast. But that morning, everything had changed. She remembered the panic, the voices shouting in a language she could not understand, and the coldness of the marble floor against her skin. The palace had been invaded, its halls filled with armed rebels. Her father had been away on a diplomatic mission, and her mother was too ill to protect her. Alone and terrified, Ceres had fled to the only place she could think of, the secret corridors beneath the palace. The footsteps of her pursuers echoed in the dark, growing louder by the second. Just as she had thought it was the end, a figure appeared from the shadows. He was tall, with dark eyes and a voice that sounded like thunder, yet somehow it was comforting. He wore strange armor, nothing like the soldiers she had seen in the palace. His language was foreign, but his actions spoke louder than words. He had whisked her away, carrying her through the secret tunnels to safety. She had never seen his face clearly, only the soft glow of his helmet's visor as he led her through the darkness. But what she remembered most was the warmth of his hand on hers and the feeling of being protected. The human, as she later learned he was, had been her savior. After that night, he disappeared. No one knew who he was or why he had come to her aid. His mission had been secret, and his identity was a mystery. Ceres's parents had kept the details hidden too, possibly out of shame that a mere human had saved their precious daughter. She had asked countless times about him, but her questions were always brushed aside with vague answers. As the years went by, the memory of her mysterious protector faded, buried under the duties of being a princess. She had trained in diplomacy, warfare, and the art of leadership. She had attended countless meetings and strategy sessions, learning to govern her people with wisdom and strength. Yet, in the quiet moments, when she allowed herself to reflect, that memory always lingered at the back of her mind. Now, as an adult, she had come to a painful realization. The world she had once known was not as secure as she had believed. Her people were in danger, and the traitors who sought to overthrow her family were not just outside the palace walls. They were within it. But there was something else that troubled her. The human who had saved her, the one who had disappeared without a trace, was not gone. She felt it in her gut, a sense of knowing, a pull that had never left her. He was still out there, somewhere. Ceres was determined to find him. The decision came suddenly, as though something deep inside her had awakened. She would not be another puppet ruler. She would not stand by while her empire crumbled beneath her. She would search for the truth, not just about the rebellion, but about the man who had risked everything to save her life. She turned from the balcony, her mind racing with possibilities. Where could he be? What had become of him in the years since that fateful night? Was he still alive? And why had he disappeared without a word? The answers she knew were out there, if she could find them. Ceres gathered her courage and called for her most trusted advisor, General Narek. His presence was always a comforting one, a constant in the chaos of court politics. He entered, swiftly, his expression unreadable. "Your Highness," Narek said, bowing low. "How may I assist you today?" "I need you to help me locate a human," Saris replied, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "A human who saved my life when I was a child." Narek looked puzzled. "A human? But, Your Highness, humans are not part of our alliance. Are you certain this is a course of action you wish to pursue?" "I am certain," she replied firmly. "He is the key to something much larger than just my past. We must find him." The general hesitated, his eyes scanning her face for any sign of doubt. There was none. Saris was resolute, and Narek knew better than to question her decisions. "Very well, Your Highness. We will begin our search at once." Saris nodded, a sense of determination rising in her chest. She would not let this mystery remain unsolved. She would uncover the truth about the man who had been her protector, and in doing so, perhaps find a way to save her people from the impending chaos. As Narek left to arrange the search, Saris stood once more at the balcony, looking out at the stars. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. The past was not as forgotten as it seemed, and the human who had once saved her was about to return to her life in a way neither of them could ever have imagined. Princess Saris had never felt so uncertain in her life. The halls of the palace, once a place of strength and comfort, now seemed cold and distant. The weight of the crown was heavier than ever as she prepared to set out on a journey that felt both impossible and urgent. The search for the mysterious human who had saved her as a child was about to begin, and Saris knew she could not face it alone. General Narek, her trusted advisor, stood by her side, watching as the royal transport was prepared for departure. The sleek, silver ship shimmered under the light of the nearby stars, ready to carry her away from the palace and into the unknown. Narek had already organized a team of soldiers and scouts to help with the search, but Saris had insisted on going, herself. She had to know the truth, and she would not rely on others to uncover it for her. "Your Highness," Narek said, his voice low and respectful, "are you sure about this? It could be dangerous. We don't know what we'll find out there." Saris turned to face him, her eyes filled with resolve. "I know the risks, General, but I must do this. I can't lead my people without understanding my past. The human who saved me, he is more than just a memory. I believe he is the key to saving my empire." Narek nodded silently, though his worry was clear. He had served the royal family for many years and had never seen Saris so determined. But he also knew that when she set her mind on something, there was no stopping her. As the ship lifted off from the royal grounds, Saris couldn't help but glance back at the palace. The towering spires and grand structures, so familiar to her, now felt like they belonged to someone else. She was leaving behind her duties, her security, and the safety of her empire to chase a ghost from her past. The journey took several days. The further they traveled, the more isolated they became. The outer reaches of the Xylar Empire were known for being desolate, the planets sparsely populated, and the space stations often abandoned. Saris had no idea where to begin her search, but her instincts told her that the answers lay in the dark corners of the galaxy. On the fourth day, they arrived at the outer station. The once thriving hub now sat silent, its docks empty and covered in dust. The station had been a place of commerce and travel, but now it seemed forgotten, left to rot in the farthest corners of the galaxy. "Welcome to the outskirts of the Empire," Narek said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I've heard rumors about this place, but I never thought I'd see it for myself." Saris stepped off the ship, her boots clanging against the metal floor of the station. She felt the cool air against her skin, the sharp contrast to the warmth of the palace. It was as though she had entered a different world altogether. The station's halls were dim, lit only by the faint glow of malfunctioning lights. "Let's begin the search," Saris said, her voice steady. I believe the records here may lead us to him. The search was tedious. They combed through countless logs, records of shipments, and old reports, all in an attempt to find any trace of the human who had saved her. But after hours of searching, there was nothing. It felt as though the records had been wiped clean, leaving behind no trace of the person she was looking for. Saris was about to give up when one of the station's old terminals flickered to life. A name appeared on the screen, Jason Riker. It was the name she had been hoping to find. Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the name, her fingers trembling as she reached for the screen. Jason Riker, she muttered to herself. The name was familiar, but it had been so long since she had heard it. Is this him? Could he really be here? Narek peered over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. Who is this man, Your Highness? Is he the one you've been searching for? Saris nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, this is the man who saved me. This is the human who protected me all those years ago. Then we must find him, Narek said, his tone filled with urgency. He may hold the answers you need, Saris agreed, and they set out to find the man who had saved her life. The search led them deeper into the station, into areas that hadn't been used in years. They passed empty rooms, long-forgotten storage spaces, and corridors that echoed with the sound of their footsteps. Finally, they reached a small room tucked away in a corner of the station. The door slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a darkened interior. As they stepped inside, Saris's heart raced. There, sitting in the corner, was a man. He was tall, dressed in the same worn armor she remembered from her childhood. His dark eyes were fixed on them, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence. Saris's breath caught in her throat as she recognized him. It was the same man who had saved her all those years ago, yet he had changed. Time had passed, and the years had left their mark on him. His face was older, more weathered, but the spark in his eyes, the same spark that had once filled her with hope, was still there. Jason Riker, Saris whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. It's really you. The man stood up slowly, his posture stiff, as though unsure of what to do. His gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, neither of them moved. Princess Saris, he said, his voice low and hesitant. I didn't expect you to come looking for me. Saris took a step forward, her heart pounding. I had to. After all these years, I needed to know the truth. You saved my life when I was a child. I've never forgotten what you did for me. Jason's expression softened, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. I never expected you to remember. My mission was to protect you from the shadows, to keep you safe without being noticed. But it seems my past is catching up with me. Saris couldn't contain her emotions any longer. She stepped closer to him, her voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. You've been with me all this time, and I never knew. Why did you disappear? Why did you leave me? Jason looked away, his gaze distant. I had no choice. I was a soldier bound by duty. My government demanded that I remain hidden. I couldn't risk the peace between our peoples. But now, Saris said, her voice firm, the stakes are much higher. My empire is in danger, and I need your help once more. Jason looked at her, his gaze intense. What do you need me to do, Princess? Saris met his eyes, her heart steady. Help me save my people. Together we can defeat the enemies within my empire. The man who had once saved her life was now standing before her, and for the first time in years, Saris felt that everything might just be possible. The quiet hum of the station's failing power system was the only sound that filled the air. Jason Riker, the human who had once saved Princess Saris's life, stood before her, still uncertain of what to say. They had just reunited after years, apart. And yet the distance between them felt greater than just the years. Saris studied him, her heart heavy with questions, yet filled with relief at the same time. The man who had disappeared from her life without a trace had reappeared, but under circumstances far different from the simple protector of her childhood. He had become something more, someone whose past was clouded in secrecy, someone who had been forced to hide his true identity to keep the peace between their worlds. "I never thought I'd find you like this," Sarah said, her voice softer than before. "I thought you were just a memory, a forgotten story." Jason glanced away, running a hand through his short, graying hair. "I never meant to be a memory," he said quietly. "But after that mission, there was no choice but to disappear. My orders were clear. Stay hidden. Protect you, but remain in the shadows. I couldn't risk drawing attention to you or to me." Saris looked at him, her mind racing. "But you saved my life. You've been with me in my thoughts, in my dreams. And yet, you've been living your life away from me, away from everyone. Why?" Jason took a deep breath, his face tight with the weight of the past. "I never wanted to leave you, Saris. But you were safe. Your family was protected. My mission was over. I had to move on, or risk being caught and dragged into a war neither of us could afford." Her eyes softened as she reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "I've spent years thinking about you, wondering why you never came back. I couldn't understand why someone who had been so important to me would just disappear, but now I see you were protecting us in ways I couldn't understand." Jason met her gaze, his expression conflicted. "Protecting you, protecting everyone. It wasn't easy, but your family, your empire, it was always going to be yours to lead. I couldn't interfere in that." Saris, her thoughts turning to the state of her empire, nodded slowly. "And now, it's in danger. My empire is at war, Jason. The traitors who would see my family destroyed are growing stronger by the day. I need your help. I need you to stand with me, as you did when I was a child." The words hung heavy in the air, and Jason's jaw tightened as he considered her request. He had spent years running, trying to escape the life he had been forced into, trying to distance himself from the princess he had once sworn to protect. But now, standing before her again, everything was different. The responsibility, the weight of their connection was something he could no longer ignore. "I don't know if I can go back to that life, Saris," Jason said, his voice rough. "I've seen too much, lost too much. I'm not the same man you remember. I'm not just a soldier anymore. I'm a man with a past, one that I can't simply leave behind." Saris stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering. "I don't care about your past, Jason. I care about what we can do together. What you can do for the people of this empire. What you can do for me." The silence between them stretched on as Jason looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability. And in that moment, he understood. She wasn't asking him to be the man he once was. She was asking him to be something else, something more. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Saris, I'll help. But know this. I'm not doing this because of who I was. I'm doing it because of who I am now. And I'm doing it for you." A small smile played on Saris's lips as she turned to face the large map of the galaxy displayed on the station's wall. She reached out, activating the hologram, and it sprang to life before her eyes. The glowing lines and points of light represented systems, planets, and alliances, everything that made up the empire she was tasked with ruling. "We have a lot of work to do," she said, her voice now filled with determination. "The rebellion isn't just a threat. It's a well-organized force, with support from inside my own court. We need to root out the traitors, destroy their power base, and restore order before it's too late." Jason walked over to her, his eyes scanning the map. "We'll need to move quickly. If the traitors are in the court, they'll have resources at their disposal. We can't afford to be careless." Saris nodded. "We'll Start by gathering intelligence. We'll need to find out who's behind this rebellion. I have my suspicions, but we need proof. We can't make a move until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Jason looked over at her, his eyes studying her with a new understanding. She was no longer just the young princess he had sworn to protect. She was a ruler now, a leader in her own right, one who would do whatever it took to save her people, and he would stand by her side to help her do just that. You're not alone in this, Jason said quietly. I'll help you find the traitors. We'll bring them down together. Saris looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you. For the first time since their reunion, a real smile broke across Jason's face. It was a smile tinged with sorrow, but also with a quiet sense of peace. In that moment, he realized something he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. He had never truly left her. As the hours passed, they worked together, planning, strategizing, and laying the groundwork for their mission. Jason's experience as a soldier, combined with Saris's knowledge of the Empire, made them an unstoppable team. The bond between them grew stronger as they shared more than just tactics and strategy. They shared a sense of purpose, a shared commitment to saving the Empire and ensuring its future. The day turned to night, and though the station was far from home, it felt like they had come home together. Side by side, they would face the dangers ahead, united by a shared past and a common goal. And as they prepared for what was to come, Saris couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. With Jason by her side, perhaps the Empire's future wouldn't be so uncertain after all. The days that followed Jason's return to Saris's life were filled with a quiet intensity. Together, they worked tirelessly to gather information, uncovering the depths of the conspiracy threatening her empire. With Jason's experience as a soldier and Saris's understanding of court politics, they made an unexpected but powerful team. Slowly, they were closing in on the traitors who were trying to tear apart the very foundation of the Xylar Empire. But with every step closer, they came to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. Saris knew that they were being watched, and she could feel the tension growing between her and those who had once been her closest allies. It was late one evening when the unexpected happened. Saris had spent the entire day going over diplomatic documents and meeting with her closest advisors. Her thoughts were filled with plans for the coming months, strategies for quelling the rebellion and securing the loyalty of the remaining planetary systems. Jason had gone to meet with some of his old contacts, seeking information on the hidden factions supporting the rebels. When he returned, his face was grim, a look that Saris had come to know all too well. He walked into the room where she was, working, his footsteps heavy with purpose. "Saris," Jason said, his voice low, "we've been betrayed." Her eyes widened, and she stood up from her desk immediately. "What do you mean? Who would betray us?" "I'm not sure yet, but the evidence is clear," Jason replied. "I spoke to one of my contacts, a former ally, and he confirmed that someone high in your court has been feeding information to the rebels. They've been planning a strike for weeks, and now they're getting ready to act. They know we're on to them." Saris felt her heart drop into her stomach. Betrayal. Within her own ranks, it seemed impossible. She had trusted these people, shared her plans with them, believing they had her best interests at heart. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The uncertainty gnawed at her. Jason hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "It's someone you wouldn't expect. I'm afraid it's Lord Calum, one of your most trusted advisors." Saris's breath caught in her throat. Lord Calum. The same man who had been by her side since her childhood, the one who had guided her through every major decision, the one who had been so loyal. He had always been her rock. To hear that he might be the one who was betraying her felt like a slap to the face. "Are you sure?" Saris demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He has been my most trusted advisor. I've never doubted him. He can't be." I know how you feel, Jason interrupted gently. But the signs are all there. He's been meeting with known rebels in secret, and we found a hidden message in his quarters. There's no doubt anymore. Lord Calum is playing both sides. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the information. Lord Calum had been with her through thick and thin. He had supported her decisions, given her guidance when she had doubts, and he had been a father figure to her when her own parents were distant. The idea that he could be plotting against her felt like a cruel twist of fate. "I don't want to believe it," Saris whispered, her eyes filled with pain. "But if he's the traitor, then everything we've worked for is at risk." Jason stepped forward, his hand resting on her shoulder. "I know it's hard, but we can't let this go on any longer. We need to act before Lord Calum can do any more damage. We have to expose him." Saris closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "You're right," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We'll confront him. But we have to be careful. If we make a move too quickly, it will alert the rebels. They'll know we're on to them, and we'll lose any advantage we have." Jason nodded, understanding the danger of the situation. "Then we'll need a plan. We'll gather more evidence, make sure we're certain, and then we'll expose him. We can't let the Empire fall into chaos." The decision was made, and they began to work on their plan. Over the next few days, Saris and Jason watched Lord Calum closely, gathering whatever information they could without raising suspicion. The more they learned, the clearer it became that the traitor was indeed Lord Calum. Secret meetings with rebel leaders, messages exchanged under the cover of darkness, it all pointed to him. One evening, Saris called for a meeting with Lord Calum. She had planned this confrontation carefully, knowing that if she didn't handle it right, everything could fall apart. Jason stood by her side, a silent but steadfast presence. They would need to move quickly once the truth was out. When Lord Calum entered her private chamber, he looked as calm and composed as ever. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his elegant robes flowed gracefully as he stepped into the room. But Saris could see the subtle shift in his eyes, the way he avoided looking directly at her. He knew something was coming. "You requested a private meeting, Your Highness?" Lord Calum asked, his voice smooth and polite, though there was a hint of tension beneath it. "I did," Saris replied, her voice steady but filled with an edge of steel. "I've received some troubling reports, Lord Calum. It seems that you've been involved in activities that are not in the best interest of the Empire." Lord Calum's expression faltered for only a second, but it was enough for Saris to see the truth. She had caught him. He tried to recover, but his forced smile didn't fool her. "I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean, Your Highness," he said, his voice tight. Saris didn't waste time with formalities. "I know about your meetings with the rebels, Lord Calum. I know about the secret messages you've been exchanging. You've betrayed me, and you've betrayed the Empire." For a moment, Lord Calum didn't speak. His eyes widened, and Saris could see the gears turning in his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and bitter. "You don't understand, Saris. I did what I had to do. Your family has failed this Empire. You failed it." Saris's heart sank, but she didn't let him see her pain. "You were supposed to serve me, Lord Calum. You were supposed to protect my people, not destroy them." "I did what was best for the future," he said, his voice hard. "You were too naive to see it." The words hung in the air as Jason stepped forward, his voice cold. "It's over, Calum. You've been exposed. You'll face justice for your crimes." Saris turned away, her mind racing. Betrayal had come from the last place she had expected it. But the reality of the situation was clear. There was no turning back now. The events of the past few days had been a blur for Saris. The weight of Lord Calum's betrayal still lingered heavily on her heart, but she had no time to dwell on it. The rebellion was growing stronger and time was running out. If they were going to save her empire, they needed to act fast. Lord Calum was only one part of a much larger threat, and every passing hour brought them closer to a breaking point. After exposing Calum's treachery, Saris had thought that victory was within her grasp. But instead, she found herself thrust into a new crisis. A major attack was imminent, one that could destroy everything she had worked for. The traitors within the Empire had grown bolder, and their support had swelled. The rebels had seized a critical outpost, and now they had control over one of the most powerful weapons in the Xylar arsenal, the Exkalon cannon, a massive weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets. Jason Riker stood by Saris's side as they reviewed the situation. His face, once filled with uncertainty, was now marked with resolve. He had become more than just the protector of the princess. He had become her ally, her partner in this struggle for the future of the Empire. "We can't let them keep the Exkalon," Jason said, his voice firm. "If the rebels use it, they'll destroy everything. We'll be finished." Saris nodded, her brow furrowed with determination. "We have to move fast. If they fire that cannon, the rebellion will have all the power they need. We can't let that happen." Her eyes scanned the map displayed before her. The location of the Exkalon cannon was heavily fortified, and getting inside would be no easy task. It was clear that the rebels had anticipated any moves against them, and they were ready for a fight. "Do we have any intelligence on their defenses?" Saris asked, turning to Jason. Jason grunted in frustration. "Not much. They've covered their tracks well. But I do have one lead, a former soldier who defected from the rebels. He's agreed to meet us, but he's deep in hiding. We'll need to move quickly if we're going to get him before they do." "Then we'll go after him," Saris said. "It's our only chance to get the information we need." Jason nodded and prepared the team. They had already gathered a small but skilled group of loyalists, men and women who had been with Saris from the beginning. Despite the growing darkness around them, Saris felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. The odds were against them, but she wasn't about to back down now. Not when the future of her people was at stake. The team set out in the dead of night, traveling through the shadowed corridors of the space station. Saris's heart pounded in her chest, and the weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily on her shoulders. But she had made a choice. She had chosen to fight for her people, to stand alongside those who believed in her. She wasn't going to let fear stop her now. After a tense journey, they arrived at the rendezvous point, a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with the scent of rust and old machinery, and the sound of distant engines hummed through the walls. It was the perfect place to meet a defector. Jason moved forward cautiously, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The former soldier was supposed to be here, but there was no sign of him yet. Time was running out, and every minute they waited was another step closer to the rebels launching their attack. "Where is he?" Saris whispered, her voice barely audible in the thick silence. Before Jason could answer, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a man, dressed in the tattered remains of a rebel uniform, his face weary and worn from years of conflict. "I'm here," the man said, his voice low and cautious. "You've come for the Exkalon, haven't you?" Jason and Saris exchanged a quick glance. They both knew the risks. The soldier had once fought for the rebels, and there was no guarantee he could be trusted. But they had no choice. The information he carried was their only hope. "Tell us what we need to know," Jason demanded, his tone firm but not unkind. The man hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting nervously around the darkened warehouse. "The Exkalon cannon is hidden in a heavily guarded facility," he began. "It's located on the planet Ansaris, just beyond the outer rim. The rebels have set up a command center there. The defenses are intense. Turrets, shields, and a fleet of ships surrounding the station. You'll need to find a way to get through their outer defenses first." Saris stepped forward, her voice steady. "And once we're inside, how do we disable the cannon?" The defector paused, then took a deep breath. There's a control room inside. If you can access it, you can deactivate the Exkalon. But the moment you enter, the rebels will know. They'll send everything they have at you. Jason tightened his grip on his weapon. We'll figure it out. We're not backing down. Saris turned to face the man. You've helped us, but if you're lying, I'll make sure you don't leave here alive. The man nodded quickly, clearly terrified by the princess's resolve. I swear I'm telling the truth. I just want this war to end. Jason stepped forward. You're free to go, but if we don't return, don't come looking for us. We won't be able to protect you from the rebels. With a final glance, the man vanished into the shadows. Jason turned back to Saris, his face filled with determination. We leave now. If we don't get to the Exkalon, the Empire is as good as lost. Saris nodded. Her heart raced as they made their way back to the ship. They had no time to waste. The mission ahead of them would be dangerous, perhaps even impossible, but Saris knew they had no other choice. The Exkalon had to be stopped as they prepared to leave. Saris felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She was not alone in this fight. Jason was with her, and her people would stand by her side. They had come too far to fail now. The planet Ansaris was nothing like the one Saris had known. It was a cold, barren place, the sky forever covered in thick clouds, casting an eternal gloom over the surface. The rebel stronghold, where the Exkalon cannon was hidden, lay deep, within a heavily guarded facility, surrounded by layers of defenses. Saris and Jason's mission to stop the weapon's launch had reached its final stage. Failure was not an option. Saris stood before the massive silver doors of the rebel facility, her heart pounding. The team had infiltrated the planet's orbit under the cover of darkness, and now they stood at the entrance to the most dangerous part of the mission. They had made it this far by using their wits, but the real test was ahead. Inside these walls lay the Exkalon cannon capable of destroying entire fleets, and they had no time to waste. Ready? Jason asked, his voice low but filled with determination. He checked his weapon, a silent reminder of how high the stakes were. Saris nodded. We have no choice but to be ready. The plan had been simple, but the reality was much more complicated. They would need to get through layers of security, disable the defenses surrounding the Exkalon, and then reach the control room to deactivate the weapon. If they succeeded, the Empire would have a fighting chance. If they failed, the rebels would have all the power they needed to crush the Empire in a single strike. The doors before them opened silently, revealing the dark interior of the facility. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the cold, metallic halls as they moved forward, keeping their pace steady. Jason led the way, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Saris followed closely, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. She couldn't afford to hesitate, not now. The first wave of guards was just as expected, trained, heavily armed, and positioned in strategic locations. Jason and Saris moved with precision, neutralizing the guards quickly and silently. Each movement was calculated, each step taken with the knowledge that one mistake could cost them everything. Saris had never felt such tension in her life, but there was no room for fear now. She had a responsibility to her people, to her empire, and to herself. As they moved deeper into the facility, the defenses grew stronger. Laser grids, force fields, and automated turrets blocked their path. They had prepared for this, but the HFY's sheer number of obstacles made every step more difficult than the last. Saris and Jason used every trick in the book to bypass the security, using stolen access codes, hacking systems, and relying on their skill to stay one step ahead of the rebels. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, the control room. It was heavily guarded, as expected. Saris could feel her pulse quicken as she observed the guards standing in front of the thick glass doors. The Exkalon cannon was just beyond them, waiting to be activated. Jason turned to Saris. We can't get in without a fight. Are you ready for this? Saris took a deep breath, steadying herself. The moment of truth had come. She had spent her whole life learning to lead, to make decisions for the good of her people. Now, she had to prove it. "We don't have a choice," Saris said, her voice calm but determined. "Let's do this." In a flash, the team launched into action. Jason moved with the speed and precision of a seasoned warrior, taking down the first two guards before they could react. Saris followed, her own weapon aimed at the remaining rebels. The battle was brief but intense, the sound of gunfire and the clash of metal filling the room. When it was over, the last of the rebels had fallen. Saris stood in front of the control panel, her eyes scanning the screens in front of her. The countdown to launch was already in progress. Every second mattered. "Jason, help me with this," she said, her voice steady as she worked to input the necessary codes. Jason stepped forward, his eyes scanning the screens. "The rebels have locked down the system. I'll need to override their security." Saris watched as Jason typed quickly, his fingers moving over the console with practiced ease. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her, each second dragging by like an eternity. The Exkalon cannon was so close, and she could hear the faint hum of its systems powering up, preparing for destruction. Suddenly the console beeped, and the countdown paused. Saris let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Jason had done it. They had gained control. "We're not out of the woods yet," Jason said, his voice tight with focus. "The cannon's still armed. We need to disable it before the rebels get a chance to regain control." Saris nodded. She didn't need to be told. She could feel the weight of the responsibility bearing down on her. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the Empire. She was ready. They both were. Working together, Saris and Jason continued to dismantle the Exkalon cannon systems piece by piece. The rebels were already regrouping, and they knew time was running out. Every click of the keys, every adjustment, felt like a heartbeat, a countdown to their success or failure. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the systems deactivated. The countdown stopped. The Exkalon cannon, the weapon that had threatened to bring the Empire to its knees, was neutralized. "We did it," Saris whispered, her voice filled with relief. Jason gave a small but satisfied smile. "Yeah, we did." But there was no time for celebration. The facility was already on high alert, and the rebels would be coming for them soon. It was time to leave. They made their way back through the facility, retracing their steps. As they moved, Saris couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought them to this point. She had learned so much over the past few days, not just about her empire, but about herself. She had faced betrayal, danger, and fear, but she had never wavered. And now, she had a chance to save her people. As they boarded the ship and made their escape, Saris stood beside Jason, looking out at the stars. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. The Empire wasn't saved yet, but the battle was far from over, and with Jason by her side, Saris knew they could face whatever came next.